everyone. Welcome to Penny's Mind Files Method, the podcast showing you where the off ramp to the healing highway is when you're stuck on the life sucks road that goes nowhere. In this episode, we're going to dive into the links between prayer, meditation, heartbreak and coherence, ancient biblical texts, and how the Mind Files Method emotional frequency filter scale ties it all together. So, let me share with you how I found these links. Several years ago, I wanted to add to my counseling certificate, so I took some extra courses, one of which was a certified heart math practitioner course. I love the heart math program because it shows you in real time where your true vibrational energy is at. And for many people, that helps them further along the healing highway. And then years later, during one of my spiritual morning studies, I just was really pondering, like, how did Jesus know what he knew? Like, where did he learn to do what he did? How was he able to perform miracles that the priests and the Pharisees couldn't? There's all kinds of theories out there about who Jesus is and where he might have studied, but none of them really rang true for me. So I dug into the Old Testament with the hope of finding clues. And today I'm going to share one little story about a woman named Anna that provides exactly the kind of clue that I was looking for. Now, before we get too far, let me state that I wasn't raised in any traditional Christian belief, and my interpretation of biblical text may not be the same as yours. But for those of you who don't go to church or haven't read the Bible, maybe you don't even believe in God yet. Maybe hearing my interpretation will open the door to God and faith for you. And ultimately, that's what I'm trying to do with especially dedicated spiritual episodes because, as I've stated many times, healing does not happen without God. Okay, so personal energetic frequency is not a new age concept. To see the connection between today's scientific explanation and biblical references, though, you're going to have to be willing to accept a slightly different explanation or interpretation of the text that I'm about to read here, which means that, right, you're going to have to be vibrating somewhere close to reason, which is 3 steps above neutral. So let's look at the emotional filter frequency scale here. And I know if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or Podbean, you can't see the screen. If you need to see it at a later date, then be sure to go to the YouTube channel or my Rumble channel, and then you can watch it later. So, okay, to be vibrating in reason, it's in the lilac color there. You can't be holding on to rigid perspectives because rigid perspectives are always motivated by fear, specifically the fear of what if. And even more specifically, it's really the fear of what if I'm wrong. Rigid perspectives or beliefs are just reinforced mind files that are difficult to change. These are files that have been referenced and reinforced millions of times by the mind's process. And in some cases, they're so thick, they're like bricks. Now, most people refer to these kinds of really rigid perspectives. They might say, well, they're a fact. This is a fact. But the thing about facts is facts change when new information becomes available. So ultimately, there's no such thing as a fact. Rigid perspectives have intense emotions attached because remember, every time you reference and reinforce a mind file, you're adding all those, whatever filters were in there, you're adding those again. Now, the ones that are in the what if are ultimately pride and fear. So when we look again at the emotional filter frequency scale, we can see that pride is 3 steps above fear. Pride's a little lighter in color because it's moving toward neutral, but it's still a long ways away from reason. So when you have a lot of rigid perspectives, you are essentially building walls that don't invite or allow new insight to come through. But here's the thing about walls. There's always little cracks in every wall. And if the Holy Spirit, if God can see that you have even a little bit of willingness and acceptance, if you are vibrating there, even temporarily in your energy field, it only needs that little teeny weeny bit for the Holy Spirit to break through and to shatter that entire brick. Okay, so let's dig into the passage here. We're going to read from the first book of Samuel. There's a story about a woman named Anna or Hannah, depending on which Bible you're reading. And she's struggling to conceive a child. She's one of two wives married to a man named Elkanah. And in chapter 1, we're told that she's distraught over not having had a child, and she goes to the temple to pray. So I'm going to read you the same story from two different translations because the translations, the differences are not small. They completely change the intended message, which changes the energetic frequency of the story. So in the Douay Rheims translation, which is an old Catholic Bible, it says, "As Anna had her heart full of grief, she prayed to the Lord, shedding many tears. And she made a vow, saying, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt look down on the affliction of thy servant, and will be mindful of me, and not forget thy handmaid, and will give to thee servant a man child, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she multiplied prayers before the Lord, that Heli, he was the priest in the temple, observed her mouth. Now Anna spoke in her heart, and only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard at all. Heli, therefore, thought her to be drunk. And he said to her, How long wilt thou be drunk? Digest little the wine of which thou hast taken too much? Anna answering said, Not so, my lord, for I am exceedingly unhappy woman, and have drunk neither wine nor any strong drink, but I have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thy handmaid for one of the daughters of Belial, for out of the abundance of my sorrow and grief have I spoken until now. Then Heli said to her, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition rather, which thou hast asked of him. So this is a direct translation from the Latin Vulgate, which is really old and really literal. So pay attention to the language. Anna had her heart full of grief. She prayed to the Lord, shedding many tears. She made a vow. As she multiplied her prayers before the Lord, Anna spoke in her heart, and only her lips moved. I have poured out my soul before the Lord. So this version preserves something essential, the inner mechanics of prayer. Two phrases matter deeply here. Number one, she spoke in her heart. Now in Hebrew, the word for heart is lav or lavav, and it does not mean emotion in the way that we think of it today. It means the inner self, the seat of intention, the center of consciousness. It's the place where alignment happens. So when the text says Anna spoke in her heart, the Hebrew meaning of that is that she aligned her inner being with her desire. And that is frequency language. Second, I have poured out my soul, she said. Now, the Hebrew phrase is, and forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, shapak nafshi literally means to empty oneself, to release resistance, to let the inner burden out, to open the deepest part of the self before God. It's a confession, right? When you are acknowledging and releasing it, giving it to God. It's not emotional collapse, it's energetic surrender. Anna isn't begging or bargaining. She isn't vibrating in shame. She's actually aligning, releasing, and opening her heart to receive from God. She is practicing the original form of heart based, frequency based prayer. Now, here's the story, the same story exactly, but it's from the Protestant New Living Translation Bible. It's a study Bible. It's meant to be educational and accessible to everybody, but the tone of the story shifts dramatically. So it says, Anna was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord, and she made this vow. O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime, and as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. As she was praying to the Lord, Eli, watching her, seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, he thought she'd been drinking. Must you come here drunk? He demanded. Throw away your wine. Oh, no, sir, she replied. I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I'm very discouraged and I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I am a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow. In that case, Eli said, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him. Oh, thank you, sir, she exclaimed. Oh, so this revised version conveys a completely kind of different intent and therefore vibrational message. The words used here convey despair and shame and guilt and emotional collapse. It psychologizes downward. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly. I am very discouraged. I was pouring out my heart in great anguish and sorrow. Now, it introduces the idea of wickedness. In the older version, she brings up Belial, right? Which is a different god, would be like an evil god. So that's where the idea of wickedness comes from. But she says, don't think of me as wicked, right? It conveys it in a different message. Like why that's important is because it changes the entire frequency of the story. So when it's conveyed in that manner, when it's taught from that perspective, then the people receiving it are reinforcing the mind file in the filing cabinets of their mind that has to do with feeling powerless. Because ultimately, all mind files that hold lower vibrational frequencies are reinforcing the belief of powerlessness because that's all tied to self-worth. The older Catholic version preserves the energetic alignment with God. The Protestant version, emphasizes desperation, which blocks you from receiving God's grace. So ultimately, one is vibrating at love, and the other vibrating at guilt and shame. Now, it's important to understand because the frequency you pray from determines the frequency you receive from. And you can see here on the diagram where love is, and joy and peace, and where guilt and shame and apathy and grief and fear and craving, right? She's longing for a child. Like all those things are way at the bottom. So the idea that the frequency you pray from determines what frequency you receive in. That's karma, right? That's the idea of karma. What you put out, you receive. What goes out comes back. But here's the cool part. What Anna does in this story, aligning her heart, releasing resistance, clarifying her intention, and then trusting that God will know what to do because God knows everything, is the exact same pattern that Jesus teaches centuries later. Because Anna's story takes place somewhere around 1100 BC, somewhere around 400 years after the Israelites were exiled from Egypt when Moses led them out into the desert. Jesus' time is like 400 years after that. And a lot had happened in between there. And the Hebrew people got caught up in ritual and purity laws and having to do things right so that they wouldn't upset God. Well, that kind of behavior is consequence of cycles of trauma, right? Because all the things that the Hebrew people had been through for those 400 years was cycles of generational trauma. So if God is viewed through a lens of guilt and shame, which is like fear-based lens, then what happens is human emotions get projected onto him. But God isn't a person. He doesn't feel what we feel. He doesn't feel anger. He doesn't want vengeance. Those emotions vibrate way at the bottom of the scale. God's vibration, way, 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 way at the top, like way above even the top of this scale. It's above enlightenment. My scale only goes to enlightenment. It's God who enlightens us, right? So, what Jesus is trying to do is restore the heart based prayer. He points out the hypocrisy of the priests and the Pharisees and explained why these obsessive rituals that they were doing weren't working. So, let's just look at one example in the New Testament. Let's look at from the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 6. Jesus is teaching everybody how to pray. So in the old Catholic version, it says, "But thou, when thou shalt pray, enter into thy chamber, and having shut the door, pray to the Father in secret, and the Father who sees in secret will repay thee. And when you are praying, speak not much as the heathens, for they think that in their much speaking that they're going to be heard. Be not you therefore like to them, for your Father knows what's needful for you before you ask him." So in the New Living Translation, the Protestant Bible, those same verses say, "But when you pray, go away by yourself, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father in private. Then your Father who sees everything will reward you. When you pray, don't babble on as the Gentiles do. They think their prayers are answered merely by repeating their words again and again. Don't be like them, for your Father knows exactly what you need even before you ask him." And then in both versions, right, he teaches the Lord's Prayer. So if we think about it, Jesus is telling us that prayer is not information. It's heart-centered alignment, the chamber, and shut the close it behind you. Don't let anything else into your heart. Not go into a room and close the door. God isn't waiting for the right words. He's reading the frequency of your heart. He's reading your true vibration. So when Jesus tells us to go to the chamber and in private, he's not speaking about a physical room. He's talking about the true vibration of your beliefs, the place where intention and emotion and consciousness speak with God. Now, there's other places in the New Testament where Jesus points out the same spiritual, energetic message. But right around the Lord's Prayer there in the Bible, that's a good place to start. Now, when you think about these two passages, one from the Old Testament and then from the New, and you look at them from an energetic perspective, prayer and alignment or coherence and meditation, when you think of it from that perspective, it all makes perfect sense. Jesus taught through heart-centered lens throughout his whole ministry, right? He told us Your Father knows what you need before you ask. When you pray, go into your inner room, go into your heart. If you believe in your heart, right, ask in my name, meaning ask in the same alignment with divine nature, not using Jesus's name as some kind of magic spell, magic phrase. He says, according to your faith, let it be done to you. According to your faith, your true energy, what you're putting out, what you're sending out, that's not what you believe, but what you actually believe. Now, those are the same mechanics that Hannah was using, right? Desire plus alignment plus trusting that God knows and that God will hear, and because asking it will ask and the door will be opened, right? God will answer your prayer, but not from fear or shame or desperation or performance, right? It's all about frequency, inner coherence, heart-based intention. This is the spiritual technology that Jesus mastered. And he learned it from the stories he was hearing that we see now in the Old Testament. So, my main point here is that energetic frequency is not a modern idea. It's not new age. It's not trendy. It's ancient. It's biblical. It is the original operating system of prayer. It's how we converse with God. See, when you understand this, the Bible opens up in a completely different way, a new way. It's not a book of rules, it's a book of energetic principles and principles that still work today. So, the Mind Files method shows you how easily we misinterpret things, not because we're flawed, but because our inherited mind files filter everything through old, emotional, wounded emotional frequencies. And these patterns get passed down, sometimes generations and generations, until somebody breaks that cycle. They are conscious enough to see them. So the emotional filter frequency scale, it allows you to visually see exactly where personal energy is and where it's vibrating, and how that relates to the dominant mind files in the filing cabinets of your mind. Because again, what we think we believe and what we actually believe are two different things. But God, or the universe, if you like that word better, responds to the energy of our truth, not the story that we tell ourselves. So that's the heart of today's episode. Ancient prayer, heart-based alignment, coherence, intention, it's all the same spiritual technology. And when you understand your own frequency, then you finally understand how to use it. That's it for today. I hope you heard something that sparked a aha or opened a new doorway for you. If it did, leave me a comment or reach out on social media. I really like to know what's resonating with you. And if you know somebody who might benefit from this episode or any of them really, then please share. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.